Hello everybody, this is Bitcoin Macro, and on this video guys I'm going to talk about Kadena. So Kadena is one of the layer 1 proof of work projects, the only one essentially that is of that caliber essentially with such a high throughput, where it actually has almost 20 branches and it has some very special scalability and speed. So it's very different from what many people are already used to, and I would urge everyone to just go and check what it actually does. So I'm not going to get too much into the details of what it does, but I'm just going to stick with what I see in terms of its price, action, and what I think is going to be happening soon, because recently it got listed on KuCoin and I think that's fairly important. So first things first, they did change the tokenomics fairly recently at the beginning of the year. When the old emission rate was about 72%, it's now at 46%. Now it's a relatively high inflation coin because it has pretty high emissions in terms of mining, because it's at 23%. That's quite a bit. Now they have changed several things in terms of how the unlockings would work, and there are so many things that have been going on in terms of who has what coins. Like some of the coins got burned, then there are so many coins that are waiting just to be mined, some coins that haven't been released to investors, because of the vesting and all that stuff. So what I would say is that this is a pretty high inflation, and this is just something that you should be aware of, guys, when you're buying any coin. The inflation rate is the first thing you should be checking. Now, if you're buying short term, that's probably not an issue, but if you're looking for something long term, then it's definitely something that you should be taking into account. So Kadena raised about 15 million. I don't know, maybe they raised more. It's very weird, because anywhere I check, they all say something different now, because they did some private sales and then some ICOs. So essentially, they raised anywhere between 15 million and 30 million, in my opinion, or maybe 35 million, I should say. And the raise was somewhere between 0.5 per coin and $1. So from the time that they raised the money, the price hasn't really done very well. It's one of those coins that hasn't performed very well since then, as it's still at 1.4, and at some point it was also almost at 0.1. Okay, just think about 10 cents for a coin that raised money at about 0.5 to $1, and that's a pretty big difference. Now, when I'm looking at the chart in terms of the US dollar, that looks fairly good, because we have that drop, that massive capitulation right there from a relatively newly created coin during a period where alts were doing relatively well. So it was after the key bottom, and at that time everything was sort of going up, or at least some segments of the market were going up, and Kadena did well initially, but it was just listed on very few exchanges, Bittrex being one of them. And over the last few days, we had the addition on KuCoin, and that came right after it had already broken out in terms of USD, came all the way back, and it's now looking still relatively strong, despite the fact that this candle looks a bit smashed, like it has pulled back quite a bit. So if I just look at Kadena in terms of Bitcoin, when I'm looking at the Bittrex chart, I can see that it's above that key support level back then, from this level right here, and potentially is almost at that level as well. Now it has been rejected at this support level, and maybe I could watch it here as well. So that was essentially when the price started trading. That was probably on some smaller exchanges, much smaller ones, but it just shows us that pretty much this support area rejected the price initially, but now we have touched it twice, and now as the price is coming back down, I do believe it could potentially do fairly well, because yes, it might go sideways for a little bit longer, but now that it has been listed on KuCoin, maybe it has another pump. Now I wouldn't think that this would be the next big thing or a massive project, but it was just something that people have talked about in the past, and now it's kind of under the radar, and I do believe it could be one of those projects that do well, at least in the short term, and potentially could come all the way back to the highs right here. So from here, you could easily have a 200% increase. Okay, wouldn't be surprised at all if that happens, because yes, this candle looks weird, but remember, whenever something gets listed, the price tends to pull back anyways. So this might be just a great opportunity to buy. Of course, we might see it go sideways a little bit, maybe chop in this area and then pump, but at least to me that looks pretty good, because it's definitely in an uptrend and it's one of those coins that haven't pumped much. So definitely an uptrend. Still, when I see a double test of a certain resistance level, I do believe it might go higher. And remember that those high inflation coins, they tend to capitulate pretty hard, and then at some point, once the unlocks happen, once let's say the tokenomics change, they tend to do fairly well, and this might be the case here as well. Now, of course, proof of work coins don't tend to do very well, and that's something that you need to keep in mind. So I'm just trying to give you guys the most information that I can about what I think about this coin, because again, it's one of those coins that had a pretty large ICO, at least at that time. It was one of the most anticipated coins, but of course now that proof of stake is the main consensus mechanism and overall has less of an impact to the price, because when you have proof of stake, most people stake the coin and they keep the coins to stake more coins. Okay, it's a really weird game. It's like a Ponzi to an extent, because when it comes to proof of stake, essentially people make more money by having money, but the money that they make, they don't make them from fees, but they make them at the cost of all the people that are not staking. So essentially, when you're not staking, you get penalized for being inactive. And then the question is, what if everyone stakes? Then who is making money? And then the answer is nobody's making money. So it just becomes a little tricky when it comes to proof of stake. But on the flip side, when it comes to trading, those are the projects that have the most value retention and user retention, because when it comes to proof of work, miners sell the coins. They're not that interested in keeping them long term, but they're more interested in making short term profits rather than long term. And they can also switch to many different networks, and that's why it's usually best to have one proof of work network. Usually in proof of work, only one chain can succeed, because it's just a matter of resources, and the rest of the chains are relatively unsafe, at least when it comes to different algorithms. So that's it from me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment down below on what you think. If you have some information about why this coin is special, why maybe people should be avoiding this coin. Also, remember, you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Telegram, and you can follow me on TradingView as well. So once again, guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.